Okay, everybody, House Education, Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. Continuing our H.454 discussion, getting ready to return to class size minimums and language needed around that. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Brady, who's been speaking with those in the field about some language that may or may not work.
Okay, so we hopefully we will have Beth back with us in like 10 minutes or so, based on conversations we had live this morning, and asking her to go ahead and talk with Chelsea and the VSA to help us sort out some of the things we're struggling with in the specifics in the class size language. They may be coming back with some suggestions. I think just procedurally here, especially for folks who are new, we're in sort of, well, many of your teachers, so it's basically like the end of the semester. It's sort of, all hands on deck, crunch time / students are like, what can I still do for 5 points? And so there's a lot of side conversations that are happening, not to leave anybody out of anything, but like 8 things have to happen at once for any chance of this. So as these things come up, I'm emailing Chelsea and saying, okay, can you talk to Beth about that? As you're seeing things and have people you want involved in the conversation, you can connect them directly to Beth. We do not have a monopoly on her time. She's being pulled into other committees too. So some of that stuff is happening, not all live on camera, but it's not meant in any way to, it's just trying to keep this process moving and the timeline that we're on. And so to that end, I also met with Beth instead of lunch, and we've got lots of discrete pieces she's been giving us to keep it sort of manageable and focused on the thing at hand. But we're moving towards a bill or a strike all to a bill that then we will ultimately have to vote on then, whatever dark o'clock on Friday. And so we met to talk about how does it all fit together so that we can have, even if we haven't gone through all the parts of it yet, we have to go through every part of it, but get the whole package on the table for all of us to see, and for a lot more people are watching than are sitting in this room to be able to see and have the actual language, hopefully by tomorrow morning. So Beth and I talked about how to structure all these kind of disparate pieces into a bill, or the strike all of the bill. And I admittedly use the frame I've been using in here, and so you are welcome to offer alternatives. But of saying there's sort of major buckets of work of what we're doing in committee, and to the best that we can organize the bill that way, so that whoever is doing all this on the floor has sort of story to tell about the bill, and we all have a story to tell to the greater public of what we're doing here. And it's a hard story to tell, I think, as we're all figuring out. So the buckets that she's trying to organize things into in our bill are the same kind of areas, domains we've been in. Scale is where we spent a lot of time and where we are trying to get to as close as we're going to get to some wrap up, maybe by the end of today. That's class size, school size, district size, all the size stuff that impacts quality and impacts efficiency. Then there's the statewide cohesion bucket. We got some testimony from AOE back on some of that stuff last year. We've heard bits and pieces about it. We need to actually see the language. Beth has drafted language based on a lot of the testimony we've gotten. When she's sitting in here, she's often taking the ideas and putting them into legislative language. So we're ready to look at real drafts. And then the last piece that we've talked about a little bit more in the budget context, but not so much here, is the statewide governance piece, the AOE capacity, the state board capacity, their roles. We've got things to consider and talk. So she's going to put it into one package that sort of flows in that general order, for us to be, for everyone to have access to as of tomorrow. The other big assignment we have is that it's up to us as the policymakers to set the intent of why we're doing this in the intent section of a bill. And so we have an opportunity, but it's a short one here, to write what is our intent? Why are we doing this? To sort of, again, tell the story that will be then codified, and also help us with, what we are telling Vermont about why we're doing it. And so she's listened to a ton of our conversations. I've taken notes when we've had committee conversations and literally made wordles to see like what words came up the most and the biggest. But we are hoping, and if we have to wait a few minutes for her, we could maybe do this now for 15 minutes or so to sort of collectively think about what are the biggest sort of phrases or themes we want to ensure are captured in the legislative intent of why this is all happening. And we might ask our resident writer, Representative Hunter, to help us with some of the construction of this into an intent section. I mean, I've been doing little writing bits and pieces. Beth is trying to pull
I'm sure
themes,
it's
but
fine.
again, this is a group project. Group projects are fun and challenging. So if we're waiting for Beth, we could have a little bit of a conversation about intent and major themes. It's not gonna be perfect, so that those who are then trying to put those into words can bring back some actual language to look at tomorrow.
But let's do that.
Great.
You're doing an excellent
will-
job facilitating.
I will take notes. If one other person wanted to take notes, especially since Beth's not here yet to listen to it, and she'll probably try to go back to listen, but we are now asking a lot of her in real time.
I can do that.
So whether it's like just a little sort of statement, or if it's, I would go back to a certain document, I'd want to pull some things from here. Like for me, I want to go back to what because we did this with creating on the commission on future public education. So now I'm like, oh, what did we say our intent was then? Because sort of it's still the same intent that was only a year ago and we were in largely the same situation. So there might be some language we would reuse and repeat. But other thoughts?
Sure, I'm happy to sort of start things off. I think on a broad scale, the intent is to create a school system in Vermont, public educational school system in Vermont that is stable, that is at a scale that connects affordability and opportunity, greater affordability and greater opportunity. And I might just hold there and let somebody else jump in.
I don't have any I mean, what I would say is you hit on two of my words that I wrote down here, opportunity and stabilization. I also would like to include, parts about the transparency and the predictability.
High quality education, equitable access. Those are two terms you hear me use all the time.
Streamline, organization, maximize resources.
And I'll just say, as we're developing this, if I can, while we're developing this, my goal is always to put kids first.
Yes, yeah.
Kids first. So opportunity
Student
and
focused.
then money after that. So you know what I'm saying, in the order of how we line it up, even visually, verbally, thoughtfully.
We did say some good stuff in the yield bill from last year.
Oh, is it different than is it this, the yield bill? Oh, this is the yield bill.
Yes.
Page 887.
Okay.
I could read a couple lines.
Yeah.
The right to education is fundamental for the success of Vermont's children in a rapidly changing society and global marketplace, as well as for the state's own economic and social prosperity. A little bit about what the commission should do. Ensure that all students are afforded substantially equal educational opportunities in an efficient, sustainable, and stable education system.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a couple of phrases there we wanna,
Yeah, I think that was.
it's just last year and I would say we aren't there yet.
Do we want to be, are you thinking we could be as specific as saying, and it is our intent to create new districts that achieve a lot of the stuff we just said, that achieve greater efficiency and opportunity for students, or more equitable opportunity for students. Actually, it's going to be more, but it'll be more equitable.
Are we just popcorning right now?
Do a little bit of
Yeah,
popcorning,
sounds like
but yeah. So,
Language.
what Aaron says and what was, when we have to get, present this bill,
Yeah.
we'd like to tell the story
Right.
as to why we're doing what we're doing.
I think it's really important, especially to some of the rural areas that are gonna feel harder hit, to also mention sustainability. But at the same time that, it may look like we're making choices that are shuttering some opportunities, it's actually to regionally keep us alive for longer.
Right.
And we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but I just want to gather before a couple of us try to maybe put this into words on the page for tomorrow morning. None of this is a surprise. The things that we've been talking about, stability, scale, affordability, transparency,
Focused.
predictability, high quality, equitable access to opportunity, maximizing resources, sustainability. None of those necessarily stand out as a big surprise, but
Maybe something about outcomes.
Thank you. Yes.
could you be more specific?
And accountability.
I'm gonna go with no right now, because I disagree with many who think we're not getting good outcomes right now, so. But I do think for all our students, it's what we want. We want them to find success.
To maximize the outcome.
Assure all students have the opportunity to improve their outcomes. Keep remembering that.
In a rapidly changing society and global marketplace.
21st century learning is.
Okay, any other? We'll come back with actual language for tomorrow, but keywords and themes, or if there are other sources that like, oh, we should really quote from or pull a finding from that you feel strongly about. We sort of need that surfaced or sent to, a couple of folks today, so we can be putting that into legislative language for tomorrow.
I think for the VSA, didn't Jeff Francis say some interesting things last year about sort of modernizing a system that's sort of been layered upon layer, for the last couple of 100 years? Like, I know modernization can be a scary word for some folks, but maybe we get as an idea to throw into the mix.
Jim Francis is the former Chelsea.
Yes, from the Vermont Superintendent Association.
Do we have collaboration in there?
And I think, it might be good to look back at some of what the secretary has said in testimony about the plan and their goals as well. I think the goals are highly aligned.
That's the phrase from Friday that's sticking in my head about future proofing our system. We have a high reliance on federal dollars, and the funding can be very and that goes with stability and predictability, so.
Let's see.
He's only Casey hasn't played in, so maybe we should put him on the spot. You can just
Thumbs
say ditto.
Ditto. I mean, everyone said a lot of good stuff.
Okay,
There we go.
all right, we did the
Oh.
path, we started with the easiest, most vague thing we possibly could.
But now we're ready.
Now,
We want to go back to the class size limit.
ready to go,
We want to talk about the hard stuff.
the hard stuff.
Wouldn't it be fun if we just made the statement of purpose like a big Wordle cloud?
I don't know how the clerk's office would feel about that.
You really do wish you could present a bill with, a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, sometimes.
I got a little bit here. Sure.
Yeah. I missed, started. Some of these benefits. Okay, thank you.
So if you can't read it.
Okay.
Welcome back, Beth.
Thank you.
I don't know if
Betsy and
that's-
James, Office of Legislative
Yeah.
Council, what are we
Get some
doing?
stuff, get to work. Get to work.
Good question, though.
Do we have the ability to see changes or the proposed language that came from VSA?
No, I haven't had an opportunity to make any of those changes, and I think there's still some outstanding questions, and I don't want to share anything I've received from them without their permission, so, I don't know where that leaves us.
Remind me, is the commission part?
No, this is about class size.
I know, but if we have to set that aside, it's the commission.
You have on your website, you have the commission, the subcommittee, district boundary subcommittee, class size minimums, which, 16 DSA 828, which is which schools, school districts can pay tuition to. And I have one more thing.
We didn't get to the commission this morning, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Right.
Why don't
Keep
we-
building momentum with the potentially easier stuff.
State Board of Education appointment language. That's the fourth. Okay, so we're looking at the
Seeing it
commission.
now.
Yes,
Okay,
which what draft
What
is
is
that?
that?
That is,
4.1.
4.1.
Me get on the Zoom.
oh, that's right, we have a fair bit to go through on this, since we were actually, this is where we're narrowing the focus of the commission.
So this was in draft language here, was Peter and Chris and I looking at the existing commission, and to the best of our understanding of sort of where things stand and the biggest work that needs to be done out in the world, taking a stab at what would it mean to reduce the focus of the commission, and put it in real language in front of us. So this is maybe not every single word, but more or less, I think the three of us feel like this is.
And a lot of it is to sort of dovetail with the work of the subcommittee, district boundary subcommittee. Yeah.
Okay, so I haven't made any changes to, subsection A, although looking at it now, I think that there could be some changes potentially made here to conform with the rest of the changes you're making. But I didn't touch anything about the membership that we've been looking at, so you're adding those 5 non-voting members. And then I started making conforming changes, so I'm gonna skip through here and go to the big changes, so, and then we'll go back up to see how those smaller changes reflect in here. So just to reorient you, the commission has a whole duty subsection with a whole host of things they're supposed to do. And the first piece is public engagement. I haven't made any changes to that. Then second piece are the policy considerations that the commission should be requiring. And there were larger, all of those large letters. So starting with A were topics. And so the first one is governance, resources, and administration. And that remains largely unchanged, with the exception of removing effective integration of CTE in the education vision of the state.
Say something?
Yep.
The suggestion to take that out was not because effective integration of CTE won't be extremely important to the future of the state, but because that work is happening elsewhere, i.e. here.
Will we have it
If we
then
have
to
to.
give us an update?
We are gonna have to do that work.
And then the next topic, it was, and rather than do pages upon pages of yellow, I've just highlighted the piece here, and this is, I should say, unedited. The physical size and footprint of the education system, everything listed here, the recommendation that this draft is making is to remove it from the commission's charge. So, studying and making recommendations regarding how the unique geographical and socioeconomic needs of different communities should factor into the provision of education. And then that larger broad charge was further defined by specific analyses, and those are all struck here. And then moving on to page 8, the next topic was the role of public schools. So the commission was charged with studying and making recommendations regarding the role of public schools should play in both the provision of education and the social, emotional, and well-being of students. And then again, specific analyses are things to consider, and that's all being struck. The second to last larger topic is the education and finance system, all struck. All of the work there struck. And then I did take out the additional considerations, the last piece there.
So again, this is just to recognize that a lot of this is happening here at a much quicker pace than the commission moves. And period.
So then if you think about everything that this draft is proposing to strike, and we go back and we look at some of the language related to the, so for example, the steering commission is,
What page are you back up to?
I am on page 3. Right after the appointments. The steering group is charged with providing leadership to the commission. And there is language in here that allows the steering group to form a subcommittee of the commission to address education finance topics in greater depth. And because you've removed the education finance topic from topics for the commission to consider, I've made a conforming amendment here to remove the authority to have the education finance subcommittee.
They're still welcome to form an education finance subcommittee if they want.
Yes, this is
Yeah.
removing the shall.
Yeah.
It keeps the option for the steering group to form as many subcommittees as it wants of its membership. The finance subcommittee was unique in that the steering group was allowed to appoint, I'm on line 23 on the bottom of page 3, going on to page 4, non-commission members to the education finance subcommittee. So that language is all removed. And it would just read, the steering group may form one or more subcommittees of the commission to address key topics in greater depth as necessary. And then a similar conforming change here is duties of the commission. This is what all of those other topics fall under. So the commission still exists and it still has duties. Starting on line 4 here on page 5. The result of the commission's work currently is a recommendation for a statewide vision for the public education system. And then based on all of the strike throughs below this, I've modified that to read, the result of the commission's work shall be recommendations for the state level education governance system, including the roles and responsibilities of the Agency of Education and the State Board of Education. Period. And then in creating and making its recommendations, the commission shall engage in the following: the public engagement piece, and then the governance piece, which is all about the State Board of Education and the Agency of Education. So you could modify this however you see fit, but it didn't seem to me to be still within the commission's purview to make a recommendation for a statewide vision for the public education system based on all of the strike throughs below this language. It's really a policy decision for you all.
Okay, so as
Right.
we, what's that?
Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay.
Then I'll ask my.
This is all the language that we just walked through as being struck. Now we're in the deliverables. I'm on page 10, line 3, reports and proposed legislation. Oops, and I should actually, you'll see why in a second, but that should actually just be a report now. The commission shall prepare and submit to the General Assembly. I've left in everything that they've already done. I don't really see any need to repeal that. But modified their duties. So a written report containing final findings and recommendations. Current requirement is for the statewide vision, but again, based on the changes that we've just walked through above this language, I've modified that to read based on its analysis of the state level governance topics contained in, and then refer to the subdivision about State Board of Education, the Agency of Education. And then removed the requirement for proposed legislative language. I didn't change anything regarding the assistance or the number of meetings that the state board can have. And then we jump right into the school district boundary subcommittee. And I don't think I made any changes between what we looked at yesterday and today.
Okay. So I think part of the goal here was to have the commission really talk about districts, not necessarily, not the subcommittee, but the commission itself to talk about sort of district governance, district qualities, that sort of thing. And does that fall within the language that we have?
No.
Okay. So right now, the sole sort of responsibility of topics for the commission is solely the state level
Correct.
governance?
Correct. Yes.
All right, I think part of what we wanted to do, in my mind, go ahead.
What I think you're saying, I thought was essentially the work we're assigning to ourselves for next year.
Yes, but to have them engage in a robust public engagement process.
But if we're still in the in-between of not knowing exactly what the new districts are, like they're trying to help us move the ball in a thoughtful way, using the information in this field, like how many kids are in the real schools, what condition they're in, where could you easily make change, more easily make changes to move towards fewer districts. And then we have to come back and say which one we can live with.
Yeah.
And then figure out the minutia of how those are going to operate. Like, I feel like you're asking them to figure that out before they know what they are.
I'm not. I'm asking them to engage with Vermonters through their public engagement process about sort of the qualities of larger districts. I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, but the idea was, in my mind, to allow the work of the commissions, especially since they're engaging in this significant public engagement with all of the sort of groups of Vermonters that we have here enlisted in here, to engage with Vermonters about our educational delivery system as a way to help us and potentially the boundary drawing group for just sort of characteristics of what makes a good district. I'm not quite sure how to phrase all of this. But I saw those two sort of working in parallel as the sort of public engagement goal of the commission. But that's what I'm.
Feels too fluffy for me, and I'm a humanities teacher.
It sounds like you'd like them to publicly engage to get folks on board with there being a change in the structure.
I don't know if I'd call it
different
get folks on board. I would say get Vermonters, engage with Vermonters about the transformation concepts. I'd say the public, that the consultants hired would not not at the job of sort of trying to sell anything to everybody.
I'll just say public engagement means we're putting out what we're engaged in, what we're trying to do and asking for feedback. And I think that's really important. And I think if we can figure out how we define this, it could really help the work of that district boundary subcommittee. And I think that if we're going to ask them to engage in the public process, it has to be in alignment with the work of that subcommittee. Feels like to me. My thoughts on it. Want Vermonters to weigh in.
But what are they weighing in on?
Well, let's read what.
Restructure of districts or not?
Our goals for transparency.
Go right ahead.
We have.
So again, this is all policy. But this language, the public
I
engagement
knew we had language
language,
in here.
Yeah, we do.
is for the subcommittee.
Yes.
So the district boundary subcommittee shall engage and coordinate with the commission's public engagement subcommittee and the public engagement consultant to maximize public input and feedback regarding the development of the proposed new school district boundaries. I think we've talked about, or I've cautioned you about, and we also have language in here that says the subcommittee is the sole owner of their work product.
Right.
And then if the commission wants you all to know how they feel about what the subcommittee is recommending, they can do that on their own. But if you have the subcommittee engaging in a public process for their goals, and then the commission engaging in the same public process or using the same subcommittee and consultant for their own goals, you could have two competing agendas here.
Yeah.
Which is a policy choice.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight that. You could beef this language up, right? We could add some coordination language. You could also require an addendum to, like we do for rules, an addendum to the subcommittee's report for you all of summarizing all of the public engagement, the comments they've received, all of that. That often happens in rulemaking, especially at the federal level. So if your concern is getting that feedback to you all about the change, we can put some requirements in there about the deliverables and how they have to include summaries or comments of or links to the public engagement process, the information they've gleaned. But this language about public engagement is specific to the subcommittee, not the commission as a whole.
But potentially to the same effect. I knew there was language in here that makes me feel much better. Yeah. But
So my question isn't for you, it's actually for the future Public Education Commission, which you're a member of. What is the process that the commission on the future of public education engaging in? Have they already set their parameters? Do they already have their goals for that? So
they have contracted with a group who's highly skilled in doing this kind of public engagement. That group is sort of working to kind of hone the task. I think this provides both the commission and that group to be able to hone the task a little more clearly. And then what the consultants have is really sort of like an engagement process. It's more about how you engage with the various groups of Vermonters who may not be the types who come to every forum that we hold. And this, I think, makes clear that that should include public input and feedback regarding the development of proposed new school district boundaries. Okay. Yeah. So I wasted a lot of time talking when the language was right there to be talked about.
Would you like to look at any other pieces of language? I don't want to keep scrolling and making people dizzy.
Right.
Or myself.
I think we may be putting them,
So do we need to give a charge to the commission as a whole?
that's still in here.
It's in here.
Okay, avert your eyes.
Just say what page.
We just slimmed it down.
We're
so that
going
we-
back up to page 1.
Got it.
So you've got the creation. I didn't think to change this in the moment last evening, but this is worth, and I will certainly do that, but certainly worth reading through and making sure that it matches the changes that you've made. On page 1, subsection A, but if we go down to page 5, the duties of the commission. The first sentence I'm leaving unchanged. And then focusing the further duties of the commission on that state level education governance system. But again, this is all policy. We can wordsmith this.
Okay, everybody, further comments? You okay here? Right. Okay, I'll take the win.
Take the win.
There are no further comments.
Can,
Yeah,
if you actually scroll up to page 4. I don't know if this is necessary at this point, but I wonder, since we're reopening the sort of commission discussion. Page 4, line 4. Could we change the shall to a may? Because we put a really long list in here, and this could consume. Knowing this was a challenge in our group, in the school construction group this summer, like. If you have to consult with lots and lots of groups, that's all you'll ever be able to do. I'm not trying to dissuade public engagement, it's just if that was a failure. I will take it as co-chair of that of ours this summer to engage with the like 19 groups that were supposed to be part of our process in the 6 meetings we had. So I'm looking at this list through that lens and going, wow, I don't know if any of these have happened, and this could consume the rest of the commission meetings.
so here's what I will say is, since we've slimmed down the
And some
sort
of
of
these,
charge of the
right.
commission, I'm not sure that they need to speak with the public school
Yeah.
employee health
Yeah.
benefits. What I will say, for those who might be concerned by changing a shall to a may, the public engagement consultant we have, I think is highly ready and skilled to get at the populations of Vermont that we want to make sure that their voice is heard, regarding both sort of the big state level stuff, but also the sort of coordination with the boundary subcommittee. So I'm just saying that they may not engage with the Department of Labor, but they will very much engage with people in rural areas, et cetera. I'm very confident in our ability to sort of meet this particular goal of diverse input.
I'm happy to change it. Do you want me to change that to a may?
Yes.
And then while we are thinking of it, on page 11. Right now. There's per diem and reimbursement expenses from not more than 30 meetings. I don't think there's any other meeting. Anyway, just a consideration, and that includes subcommittee meetings. I know a lot of the folks on that subcommittee were not drawing those per diems, but your subcommittee may, if they are retired folks. And I don't know how many meetings there have been held total thus far, if this number needs to be updated.
Yeah, we should know that.
The budget update you got would include what's available yet from all of this, right?
That's right.
Which seemed like, was it like 50,000?
Yes, yeah, I don't think it's a question of money, it's a question, we changed number
Number.
30.
Yeah, it's the number of meetings.
This language.
We could say something like, district boundary subcommittee, shall be limited to no more than 20 meetings.
I think we
Outside of
don't,
that?
why,
If you just change the 30 to a higher number, does that fix?
I don't want my code to stop here, like.
I don't know how to rearrange.
They've got a very short window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
okay.
I don't think we need
The
to worry
money-
much.
The money's not a problem.
Yeah, I don't think the number.
The question is, do we just eliminate the 30? Or do we just sort of let it ride and assume that there's enough built in that it can happen? Compensation, that was, we should have up to get.
Can we
Not
assume?
more
We must
than
know.
30 meetings. No one's really taking the per diem, so there's probably. Okay, I say we just leave it. Everybody okay with leaving it? Aaron? Yeah, all right, no changes.
Yes,
Where are we going next?
All right, that's
we have
it.
this that entire piece
Well, we've been through. So
with the, I want it for into the larger draft. Including composition, every, like, who we're.
Okay, next. Can we
Size.
go there?
I think.
Tell me we're opening.
Via text, Chelsea says okay, but she's not saying it here right now.
So it's okay to what?
Just go back to the class size suggestions
That she's.
that they provided, but I'm not sure exactly what the status of those is, so, yeah.
Shall we just take a quick 10 minutes? We are back at House Education on Tuesday, March 25th, 2025, continuing discussing parts of our strike all amendment to H.454. We are returning to the topic of class size minimums with some potential changes in language that may meet some of our concerns, as well as adding some concerns that we hadn't thought of. So we'll have legislative council walk through it. The language is on the website. This is a version for draft 3.1.
Did it work? Because sometimes this doesn't.
Doesn't work.
Is that the only option?
I'm gonna try plugging it in a second time.
I can
Here, then help.
unplug mine now if that other one will work.
You just grab the
No.
wires underneath.
No, I
This
can
one is
go
working.
over and-
We're live,
Mine.
so
Wait a minute, let me try one more
proceed to
time.
vamp again.
That works?
Someone tell Dad.
Wow.
What was working?
And
So-
It's not working.
So we are going to have our committee assistant get us a new one. Is it working for you? There's several times when it hasn't worked.
Yes, it
I've
is.
used that one, it's worked. for me.
It is working for me.
I'm monopolizing
now
this
it's
one,
not
so everybody want it.
It has,
No, that's okay, we'll keep going.
Sorry,
I'm
I'm
at
technical
68%.
difficulties.
can we plug it in down here? There's plenty of cord. Let's do that.
Next year, Andy and I stood over in the last. Yeah,
We're good.
Friday.
No,
Alright.
it works off and on.
I appreciate the teamwork. Beth St. James,
Yeah.
Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm going to share my screen.
Now electric,
You,
now fully electric.
Okay, so we are looking at, we're calling this your class size minimums document, but it is the, amendment to section 165 of the Education Quality Standards Statute. Highlighting is new language between what we looked at this morning and now. The school complies with average class size minimum standards, provided however that when the class size minimums apply to content areas, et cetera. I've removed the reference to content areas from kindergarten and grades 1 through 4. And I've added the modifier of required content area and then classes for grades 5 through 8 and 9 through 12. Are we all on the same page?
Yep.
Okay.
3.1, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then page 2, lots of yellow. So multi-age classroom language has not changed. Line 3, career. So these are the exempted class types, if you will. And remember, I'm not an educator. So I apologize if I'm using terms incorrectly. Career and technical education, flexible pathways, terminal courses, advanced placement courses, courses that require specialized equipment, and driver's education classes shall be excluded from the class size minimum requirements in this subdivision. Small group services for the purpose of providing special education, supplemental or targeted academic intervention, or English learner instruction shall also be excluded.
What's a terminal?
I was just
Right,
gonna,
Yeah, that's the only one we don't know.
The key
Terminal
term
course.
here.
That's the new
I
one.
just phoned a friend. I don't have the answer on the top of my head. Just curious, so.
I asked, so this,
Okay.
this is, and I did not,
Courses that were by-
ask if it was okay to share this, but is it okay to share with us? Okay. This is language, that the Superintendent's Association helped with. So to the extent that you love it, it's all theirs. And to the extent that you have problems with it, I will own it. So big thank you to them for, helping in a pinch. I asked what terminal classes means, and the explanation I received, which made sense at the time, but may not now, was like the highest level of class. So not AP classes. Those have a specific meaning kind of across the country. But every school may have not an AP course, but like an honors level course or like the highest level course. And the term that I was given was terminal courses.
Works for me.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Like Spanish 5.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah.
You don't offer Spanish 6, it ends at Spanish 5.
Yes, oh, yes.
So good.
So the specialized courses that don't fall under the advanced placement rubric.
Yep.
And then also suggested by the Superintendent's Association is class sizes, the language on line 9 here, class sizes shall not exceed the maximum occupancy limits established by local
Fire
and state fire codes, including egress and safety requirements.
That just makes
And I'm
sense.
just gonna offer a clarification here. When we say Superintendent's Association, the speed at which we are working obviously does not allow them to take it to their whole board for a vote and go through formal processes. This is their, director with the policy background.
Yep.
Helping, talking to folks in the field, but this isn't through all the formal channels that the testimony we've gotten previously is, because we're now in
Yes.
legislative time work.
Thank you. Also, new language, in the waiver section, again, recommended through that same process that Rep. Brady just, outlined. If a school board determines that it operates a school that is unable to comply with the class size minimum standards due to geographic isolation, the recommendation here is to add the highlighted language. Or a school has developed an implementation plan to meet the standards contained in this subdivision that may include consolidation or merger. I think the implication there is that's gonna take a while.
Yes.
The school board may ask the state board to grant a waiver. I think without this language, the state board could grant the waiver.
Yeah.
But this, so I think this is fine. It's within line with what you've been talking about.
So I'm gonna bring up a potential problem that is unique to my district, and then I'm going to tell you my feelings about it with this language. So we don't do AP classes at Middlebury Union High School, we do IB classes.
I mean, internet for it.
I feel comfortable that we have a process in here that allows them to make that case rather than
Directly stating.
having to state it in here. I'm comfortable with the fact that if there's an issue, they can work it out with the state board and the AOE.
Well, I would say along those lines, even like pre-calculus, which is not required content area classes, but also doesn't fit in. I mean, I guess you could throw it in under flexible pathways.
You can, in terminal,
But like-
I think.
It's not terminal because there's more classes
I'm
beyond.
just thinking
pre-
for a kid though, like if they get that high, like and they've already fulfilled the requirements. Yeah.
I just think because we were so prescriptive on line 22 on page 1 with required content area classes,
Right,
that everything else falls someplace else,
yeah,
including the IB, I think,
Yeah.
as more schools can consider that.
I really just want to
Approach.
plug that our IB rural school
Nice.
system.
Well, I was
Humble
gonna
brag.
ask maybe or suggest that like advanced placement courses isn't really defined as sort of a legal term of art, like maybe IB
Right.
is advanced placement, like it's kind of a.
Broad.
Like a
AP
plain-
is a, I mean, probably should be in uppercase letters on the, but it is
it's a
a
little hard.
thing.
Yeah.
No, I know it is, but I'm saying in our bill, we might not be using it with like the,
Doesn't have uppercase.
yeah,
We're speaking
I don't
generally of
know.
it.
That's maybe,
No, we're speaking straight up.
maybe Beth has a different opinion.
Although,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think my response would be that AP classes are so widespread. I think it's okay to single them out.
yeah.
Right, no, I was suggesting it's broad enough to cover both like what we
Right.
all know is
I know
AP
what you're
and IB and whatever.
Because it's
other.
lowercase.
So-
Yeah.
Or there, you could say, or there were equivalents. but
Well, there you
that's
go. Well, that
upstairs.
would be fine too, yes.
I would rather allow a school to make that case to the state board, that, hey, these are just like AP classes.
And the state would already know that.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, is everybody okay moving on?
Moving on.
Waiver language,
So the line 9, class size should not exceed the maximum occupancy
Oh,
limits.
yep.
I like having it in there. Just want to really even need to say, because you shouldn't do it anyway.
Right.
But there are-
I did not suggest this language.
Yeah.
There's other statutes, but I'm still.
Yeah, all right, we'll just leave it.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Belt and suspenders, folks.
So waiver language, are you okay with this addition? So state board action hasn't changed. Actually, nothing in the class size section has changed, but there is language that we have not walked through yet. So this is, I'm scrolling through current law of the process to go before the state board and the options. And then what happens if you don't meet it, and then I've left in there, district quality standards, just so it's there. So that was the whole standalone section. New section, piece of session law. So failure to comply with education quality standards, state board action. I cobbled this language together from various different conversations. So I honestly don't know if this meets your goals or intent here. So please, now is the time. Notwithstanding 16 DSA section 165 subdivisions B, 4, and 5, which is the language we just walked through. The state board options, if you fail to meet education quality standards of closing a school or merging school districts. So notwithstanding those options and any other provision of law to the contrary, the state board is prohibited from ordering school district consolidation or school consolidation if a school fails to comply with class size minimum education quality standards, and the resulting consolidation would result in school construction costs until the General Assembly establishes new school district boundaries and takes further action regarding the consequences for failure to meet education quality standards.
So this is to say that if you, that the state board couldn't say, school A, you're not meeting your class size minimums, we hereby order you to merge with school B. But it's very clear that you can't do that without adding an addition of a couple of classrooms or whatever onto school B. But they can't do that because we don't have a school construction aid program in place.
Well, that's not what it says. though. It-
And that's
it's-
not the only reason
It
either.
doesn't say, because there's no school construction, it says you need new school district boundaries.
So go ahead, Emily.
I am going to, because that had added up above that one section there under waivers, which I'd never seen before, and this is interesting to me and I started thinking about it. I'm the one who's been pounding on the school construction thing. I don't want districts who can't meet the class size minimum to be the only way they can meet the class size minimum is to merge 2 or more schools, but the only way to merge is to add on. Okay, so that would cost taxpayers dollars to add on with a bond, essentially, probably. So especially without knowing what the district lines are going to be. So that was the goal. I'm wondering if that little piece around school construction would fit in here under, because it's really about school
Gotcha.
construction. Whether it would fit up.
In the waiver section.
I'm looking under the waiver,
Page.
it's on page 2, line 12 was where it starts. I'm just wondering whether, because, you're gonna have a plan. I'm sure it works, but I'm just wondering whether.
I guess I don't understand. The language down below is a prohibition on the state board. And this is, what does the school district have to show to get the waiver? Where does the school construction concept fit into the waiver concept? Help me.
Yeah, because I'm only trying for a temporary. And this waiver is for a permanent waiver.
Until you or your, successors make changes to it, absolutely.
I just want to make sure everybody understands the problem I'm trying to solve, which down the road will get solved likely anyway after the new boundaries, or could help. It certainly will help. And if we implement the school construction aid process.
So this new language under section B, it's only at the point at which the state board may be ordering something. It's not, doesn't have any impact on like a new district wanting to do it or whatever.
Yeah, let me just throw out what's gonna happen when I go to my communities and say, we're gonna take away your schools have got to close. You don't have a right to vote on that, even though they do right now. And your children are gonna have to drive a lot longer to get to the new school that you're going to, and it's gonna cost you dollars in construction costs. That's a pretty hard thing to tell folks when we're in the middle of a transformation of our public education system. And it may get better after the boundary line.
So are you saying the section B fails to address that or does
I'm
address
not,
that?
you're the one who said,
It's not in B that's the issue. It's the part we just read down below. It doesn't say that
that
it
is.
won't have. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page again. What
Yeah,
page was it?
it's right
Page
down
Back
to
to
page
another
5 of
B,
5.
a different B.
That wasn't me.
Sorry. Well, because you just made the point that it says they can't do it until there's school construction, but that's not actually what it says. It says
Well,
until
this
the
was
new
about-
district boundaries and take further action.
Chris?
I totally get what you're trying to say.
Thank you. I know it's
But I
complicated.
have a little bit of a hard time with this concept because say you have 2 schools that are relatively close by and one of them the building's probably at a point where it shouldn't be, it probably should be, it's ended its useful life. And they come up with a plan though for school construction. This would inhibit them from closing that school because they had a plan for school construction. I'm not reading that right, Beth?
It would not prohibit individual
doesn't.
communities from making that choice. This language on
Would just
page
be
5 would be
board.
the state board
Force.
ordering it, yes.
Which is a 2-year, multi-year process. Anyway.
Correct. To get to that order, it would be several years, yes.
Okay.
And it's, I mean, this
I
is
wasn't
a
making that.
highly unlikely situation.
There are many districts that won't encounter this. There are many districts in the state of Vermont who probably won't need to even take out a bond to merge a few schools. I acknowledge that, and I don't want to hold them back from moving forward by mentioning
not.
this. Right, that's what I'm saying. This does not. But there are some who actually have to take significant bond out to achieve the consolidation it will take. And those are the ones I'm trying to help out.
Right, and they can still do that should they
They can.
choose. But this just says that the state board can't force them if it requires. And I put a modifier in, but I'm not sure, like, in significant school construction costs, because if you're putting in a wheelchair ramp.
What's that?
Would you like me to add the word significant?
How do you-
Such a-
Make it
how do you
tricky.
define that?
It's such an
Subjective.
imprecise word.
It's subjective.
Uh, Tell us about the implications of using a somewhat vague term like that.
How about if they have to go out to a bond?
Result in
Well-
bonded school construction costs?
Or result in school construction costs funded by a municipal bond.
Result in.
I mean, because there's capital reserves,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
So,
I guess, given the options, I'm happy with the word significant.
resulting in consolidation. of-
Should we all start throwing out some numbers of what we think are significant?
I can tell you those numbers mean a lot of different things in different communities.
How about would result in school construction costs in excess of the applicable district capital reserves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a
It's less
a
vague.
limitation that probably would,
Cover everything. 'Cause
Cover everything.
Capital reserves are there for a purpose.
yeah.
I mean, literally, capital reserves have a reason.
That's a long sentence.
Yeah.
It's a good sense.
You can play around with it. It needs to be.
Don't have a period here or there.
All right. That's like the last bit of yellow that we have.
On this page,
Oh,
yes,
this.
the last piece is, language that I think you've seen before, and if you haven't, it's just asking the State Board of Education to update the education quality standard rules to comply with the class size minimum statute,
Okay.
because there is a section in there about class sizes right now.
This is, but and that's all, this is Rule 2000, not Rule 2200.
Correct.
So that does not address the other issue we had on the table, which was do all the rules apply to schools,
Right.
Correct.
which is probably our next, if everybody's feeling good about this, then we'll move on to that. For me.
Good.
But somehow forgotten how.
What are we moving
I had. Okay.
We are gonna be looking, how does Annie spend? The section 828 amendment, draft 1.1.
Section
Thank you.
828.
No, we must be.
I'm gonna just, before we talk about,
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
yeah, just, well, no, that's fine. Let's just talk about this in the context of class size minimums for the moment. Committee. As opposed to getting into, here. The other stuff.
Broader topics.
Yeah.
Just.
Okay.
So one thing I just will say, everybody will see, on page 1, line 19, where it talks about a therapeutic
Mhm.
approved independent school. And then you go down to page 2, line 5. This is, like attempt number 5 or 6 to get in the statute a definition of therapeutic schools, because right now, every therapeutic school, there's no term in statute for therapeutic school. So we're always having to say, approved independent schools eligible to receive public tuition that aren't the therapeutic schools. So this is just to separate the two.
Yes, the state board rules do define therapeutic schools, and I believe this definition matches the state board rule definition, and if it doesn't, I will ensure that it does.
If anybody have any questions on that, it's really just a technical change to help us better define what we're talking about.
Therapeutic.
Section 828 lives in the town tuition chapter, chapter 21, maintenance of public schools, which is where the town tuition program lives. And this is the section, it was previously, let me show you. This is what the statute looks like right now, one big paragraph. And this is where, so tuition to approved schools, a school district shall not pay the tuition of a student except to, and then the rest of the statute is a list of the types of educational programs that school districts are allowed to pay tuition to. When folks ask, how do we know a recognized independent school can't accept public tuition? This is the statute that does that. This, because it's not listed there. That's as simple as it gets. So, this amendment is proposing to add some criteria to some of the educational programs that a school district may pay the tuition of a student to. So what would you like me to focus on?
The complies with the minimum class
Okay.
size requirements contained in the subdivision.
So you'll notice that instead of that big paragraph, I've broken out each type of educational program into a separate standalone subdivision. So we're going to be under subdivision 2, an approved independent school that we're going to skip over A, B, and C and go to D. So a public school could only pay tuition to an approved independent school. We're going to forget that A, B, and C exist for right now. That complies with minimum class size requirements in subdivision 165A-B9 of Title 16. That should say of this title. And that's referring to everything we just walked through in the class size minimum document.
And then we should talk a little bit about lower down, I guess, section B, so we sort of understand the process.
Yep. So State Board of Education rules report this section in the larger strike call. We'll have another report section. That's why it says report there, but there's no reporting requirement here. But for the purposes of this discussion, it requires the State Board of Education. And again, this date is policy for you all to tell me whether it works or not. On or before July 1, 2026, the State Board of Education shall initiate rulemaking to amend the approved independent school rule 2200 series pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act to require approved independent schools that intend to accept public tuition to comply with class size minimum standards set pursuant to, and then the statute that we just walked through, section subdivision 165A9 of Title 16. The amendments shall also create a process for review by the state board for failure to meet class size minimum requirements and the corresponding actions the board may take for non-compliance. So with public schools, the State Board of Education has a lot of oversight and a lot of options, right? They could order the secretary to continue to provide technical assistance. They could the state could take control of the school. The state could order closure. The state could order consolidation. Those aren't really options for an independent school. So this is asking the state board that is already the regulating body for approved independent schools to come up with a process and the consequences for non-compliance.
So, this is, as Beth would say, a big policy choice on our part. We think we've heard sort of the back and forth of saying, we are really saying to public schools, you need to meet these standards. So the question is, should we also be requiring the same of a public school that is essentially funded with public tax
You mean a
dollars?
private
A private
school?
school.
Independent school.
Yes. Can I ask something? We
Yes.
have waffled between private school and independent school. Is there a difference?
Statute calls them approved independent schools eligible to receive public
Okay, but what
tuition.
we're talking about is private schools.
We're talking, yeah.
Okay,
Whatever you want to use,
Okay.
I tend to stick with approved independent schools.
okay.
Uh, Who would like to weigh in? I have found myself, honestly, feeling very much like we are asking a lot of our public schools in this. And I can't, I'm having trouble with the idea of putting them in competition with a school that is also funded by public tax dollars. That could say, well, we don't have to meet those same requirements, and essentially further eroding sort of we want scale in our schools. And I think if an independent school is also about scale, then that makes them worthy of our public tax dollars. So that's where I'm at on this, but I'm really open it to the table for comments. And you're up first, Josh.
Just clarifying for information, section A 2C has at least 51% of the student.
Yeah, we're
We're
setting
not
that
there.
topic aside.
I'm
for the
just
moment.
curious as to, like, I guess what it means and its purposes.
Yeah, so that was from the
That's
governor's
from the
original language of H
Right.
454. What it says, what it says is that to be qualified, in his case, it was the school choice school definition,
51%.
which he also limited it to 912, which we
Right.
haven't talked about at all. That it has to have been basically operating essentially almost as the equivalent of a public school by using the 51% measure.
Thank you.
Obviously, I've been here for 9 years. The topic of same money, same rules has been a sticky wicket for all of us to try and deal with. We've never sort of said we are making big steps towards scale in our public system previously. So we're in kind of a new, I would say, a new era of discussion where it used to be just sort of like, let's make everybody operate the same rules. Well, now we are changing the rules significantly for public schools.
Right.
Yes, Emily, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say quickly, we are in the middle of transformation and that requires all of our students. Transformation for all of our students, no matter where they're attending school with public dollars. And so I think this is we've had this conversation so many times for not just the last 9 years, but for the last 30 years, we've been talking about this and how to balance the playing field for all students. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I support this.
I support keeping the standards the same as well. I think there are some huge ethical implications in telling communities that they may lose their public schools because of student population numbers, because of minimum class size numbers, and then turning around and giving the money we would have given them to a different school that doesn't have to meet those standards. That seems unethical to me. It also seems like there's a lack of economic justice if the reason that kids would want to go to that other school, that families would want to send them, is because of smaller class sizes, more teacher attention. If that's something for only privileged kids, then that is seriously an issue of economic justice. And the fact is that in order to go to one of these schools, you do have to have a certain base level of privilege, because we don't provide transportation. We have parents that know how to shop for them, and we have kids that are able to get into them through the application process, which probably has a whole lot of privileged baggage there too.
And actually, the issue of open enrollment and all of that is something we took up a couple of years ago. It's not currently on the table with this. Beth?
My question is there a waiver process for them as well then?
Same.
Because I'm thinking of my situation, because our independent school is our public school. And if they can't meet theirs, for the same reasons a public school can't? Do they have the same access to the waiver of class size
So,
minimums? that-
great question.
'Cause I'm thinking
That is
you're
what
gonna-
is, I think, being attempted in section B, is
Okay.
to create that parallel track.
Where am I looking? What page are you on, B?
It's the last paragraph of the whole thing, but.
Because it
I-
talks about actions about failure to meet, but it
Mhm.
doesn't talk about waiver in the same way the public school one
Can we
does.
use the verbiage from the
And I
public
would-
school right here?
For equity,
Yeah, I mean, so yes, the tracks, the intention was to have the same sort of tracks. There's probably gonna be some legal implications. But yes, the Rule 2200 series
okay.
sort of operates as the public school type stuff, but for the independent schools.
Cause
Yeah,
I'm,
right, Chris.
So I struggle with how we frame independent schools a lot of times in this building. Independent schools serve an absolute purpose in the state of Vermont, educate kids and educate them well. And in some areas of our state, they are absolutely needed. And they have the ability, some of them, to decide to go totally private. And if you're talking about in the Northeast Kingdom, how many kids would be out of education, or we'd have to build a school building up there for them? We have to think about aspects like that when we're framing our discussion about independent school. So, that's my soapbox, sorry.
Yes, so, Beth, could you respond a bit to the, parallel tracks, parallel similar tracks? question?
I think you would just, if that is what you, I hadn't contemplated, honestly, the waiver part escaped me. I think you would just add the amendment shall also create a process for review by the state board, shall also create a waiver process and a process for review by the state board for failure to meet class size minimum law, what's currently there. You would just add the requirement that the state board rules include a waiver process.
The same waiver process, not a different
You-
one, the same one.
It has to be a little different,
because they don't have the.
which is, it's a different, set of
Um,
rules.
Well,
Why do
so
those have to be different?
I just wanna, this is all policy.
Yeah.
I just wanna be clear. So you all need to be clear with me on what your goal is as a committee for me to put it in writing. The class size waiver language includes geographic isolation as the only waiver option. Oh, actually, no, this is the wrong.
Change that.
Wrong one, but they had a plan, the other option was there was a plan for consolidation or meeting with class size minimums. Let me see, let me just refresh, see if I can, there it is. So if you want to follow the same waiver process, that would be an approved independent school that was unable to comply with minimum standards due to geographic isolation, or it had developed an implementation plan to meet the standards, could apply for a waiver. But if there was another reason for applying for that waiver, the approved independent school would not be, the waiver would not, process would apply. If you give the state board, and if that's what you want, great.
What is, isn't that what we said for public schools?
Yeah.
Yes,
We're looking at.
okay. If
I
that's
wanted
what
to,
you'd like.
that's just a question, I'm not saying go for it.
Yes, this is the public school language
Yeah.
that I have, oh, I'm not sharing my screen, sorry. Let me share. So if you say, if you either pull this language into a section related to approved independent schools, or you cite to it, these are the only standards for waiver.
So that's one option.
It would be,
Another option is to allow the State Board of Education to develop a waiver process that is specific to approved independent schools. And you can give the state board parameters on what that process can or cannot include. This is all policy.
Leah?
I just want to respond to what Rep. Taylor said. I totally hear where you're coming from. I mean, as someone that lives in the Northeast Kingdom, you're right. We have these towns that rely on these schools. And I think that sort of the difference here is that we're not saying that these schools can't remain open or that they can't receive public tuition. We're saying that they need to meet the same standards, and that gives them the option to actually accept more students, which might even be better for that town. Like, that's part of the problem, right? Is that they don't have to accept all of these students. They can keep their classes small. If they want to stay open, if they want to be a part of this, they could by accepting more students. I think that, yeah, we definitely need to make sure, I agree with you, that in these towns, there's a school, a high quality school for those kids to go to. And about the waivers, the other part, about that I guess we're kind of settled on a different process, not exactly the same one, but sort of the other part that's the difference of that with the school waivers is that they're choosing to keep, their schools small and below those class numbers versus the public school. So to give a waiver to a private school because they can't meet those class minimums because they're choosing not to accept more students, I mean, I guess it would have to be based on building size at that point.
Yeah, it's.
But that's assuming intent by the school, right? We're not even there yet. You can't assume what their intent is because you don't know that they're purposely doing that.
I would just say that we always have to bear in mind that an independent school that is eligible to receive public tuition is creating a sort of business plan that is based on receiving taxpayer dollars. I would just say, as a business person, that's probably not the best to do that and not expect there to be some strings attached with public dollars is not a good business plan.
Again, I'm thinking in my own district situation that they're gonna struggle to meet the minimums as much as any other school in my area that was a public school, just because of the population. And I don't know that I know enough about the legal issues of independent school versus public school to say that we need it to be the exact same waiver process. I don't know if there's something in the rules there, or whether it does make more sense to put it in the part that says the state board will develop. Because it
That's a
may
really good
have, it
question
may
on the
have to
table.
be slightly different. I don't know enough about it to know if it could be identical or if there'd have to be some difference in it.
That's the kind of the question on the table right now. Kate? And then
We are the General Assembly, so I think if we want the rules to be the same, then we make the rules the same.
we're just trying to get clear as to what we want. Emily?
I'm comfortable with the waiver language in here as it is without going to the state.
And I think the issues we have with sort of those approved independent schools that, are serving a population where there may not be much of an alternative, especially for a public school. Geographic isolation will always be
There.
certainly something important. Yeah, Josh.
Along what you were just saying, just thinking about our time here so far this year, would it make sense to bring the independent schools in to just have a quick testimony? Because I think that could lend to, their from their mouths to us, what you're describing in the rural communities. I mean, I know we haven't seen anything from them. I think they would probably come right in to talk to us from out here.
They have not requested to testify in committee.
Can we request that they like come in and quickly?
We can. I am hearing, I'm not gonna put a lid on it, but at least for this part of it, that for now we will sort of go with same and parallel.
So same waiver process. And then
Same,
keeping the state board coming up with the failure to comply process.
Yeah.
Okay.
multi-year process. What we don't have is, The AOE, I don't think has the right to step in as they do.
Public.
No, they.
That's why the suggestion here is the host of options available for a public school. Share my screen again.
Right, it's a long process that includes assistance from the
Right.
Secretary
So
of
the
Education.
agency could certainly provide technical assistance to to an approved independent school, and I believe they actually do for a lot of the approval process.
Right.
Supervisory union boundaries is not applicable to approved independent schools. The secretary could not assume administrative control over an approved independent school. The secretary could not close an approved independent school, and consolidating school districts is not an applicable process. So by saying state board, figure out the corresponding process for what happens when a approved independent school fails to meet the class size minimum requirements, you're asking the state board to, well, actually, you're asking the state board to come up with a concept that is specific to approved independent schools, but let's just look at this may just solve it. So this is the approved independent school statute. Everything under subdivision B is what applies to approved independent schools. And C is recognized independent schools. And let's see. Thought there was a process in here. There's already a process here it is. The state board may revoke, suspend, or impose conditions upon the approval of an approved independent school. After having provided an opportunity for a hearing, for substantial failure to comply with the minimum course of study, for failure to demonstrate that the school has resources required to meet its stated objectives, for failure to comply with statutory requirements, which by amending section 828 and requiring them to follow class size minimums is a statutory requirement or the board's rules. And then upon revocation or suspension, the students required to attend the school who are enrolled have to enroll somewhere else. And then the state board's rules have a whole process for what this looks like the due process requirements and all of that. So you could just say, if you fail to meet the class size minimum, this process kicks in. It may not be as long of a process as the education quality standards review. This is the process that already exists in state law.
Yes. And it's only in May.
Right.
I think it is we are speaking specifically to waivers, et cetera. I mean, this is sort of the same thing, but
That's you.
this appears a little more punitive and not collaborative or working with.
This,
I would say a takeover by the agency of ed is pretty punitive as well.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
public
that's
schools.
Yeah.
so these are the state board's rules on independent school program approval. And I don't know these like the back of my hand, so I'm not quite sure what section. And there's no table of contents. But there is a whole section in here on that failure to meet applicable standards process. And if you'd like, I can stop sharing my screen and find it. And ultimately, this is all policy decisions for you all to make. So let me see if I can find it.
All right, so I just want to read to everybody, section B. It says, meet class size minimums. The amendments shall also create a process for review by the state board. So we've left it sort of up to the state board. in this language. So I guess we're sort of back to the question that which council proposed, which is, do we want to just leave it up to the state board? Or do we want to use the language in the waiver section above?
I can't leave it up to the state board with an amendment we're gonna see at some point.
Yeah, shall also create.
So you can or can't?
Cannot.
Cannot. Those
What
are
do you
nice.
mean by an
It should be
amendment?
the same.
It's on our committee page. So there's an amendment that we are gonna look at the composition of a board of education.
Oh,
Gotcha. Okay. So we've got to use some clarification on some parts and other parts that sort of tie together.
What do you mean?
Well, if we make no changes in the state board, you might have a different opinion of this. If we make changes,
Possibly different opinion of this.
go ahead, Randy.
I don't have a good answer here. I appreciate support. I guess particularly I think the way Leanne has described it, is that they applying the standard the same in terms of class size minimums. I will say I'm endlessly frustrated at how cumbersome it is to operate dual systems and the education policy. Often we get hung up on these questions and we can't, you name it, on so many, everything I've worked on since we got here. And we have to figure out how to do it in two different ways. And we're a very small state. Everything's expensive. We're trying to bend the cost curve. We're trying to move to efficiency. We're trying to get to scale. And we just keep saying, but we need to do things totally different in two different systems. That is duplicative and expensive. That is setting aside strong feelings about just the actual implications on the kids who have the least opportunities in our school. So I'm not going there in terms of the bigger changing the system so that we don't operate parallels, but to me, this seems sort of a bare minimum in this moment.
Right, because we haven't even talked about open enrollment, licensed teachers, all of the.
Not going on any of
Meeting
that.
Yeah, we're not going to, it's just about applying the same rules with the class size minimums.
Well, then we definitely need the same equitable waiver system.
Yeah.
For that.
All right, so that's an argument. So the question was, either state board or
It sounds
Or-
like there's
say,
agreement to have it equitable, that
Yeah.
have it.
right, so we got
Essentially the
we've got a
same.
waiver system for the public schools. Let's do your best to draft something that reflects a parallel process.
For waivers only.
Are we still on the topic of just class size?
Just class size,
We are, yes.
Just class size, right?
There's a reason you want to keep it to class size minimums right now.
Yes. However, we might go and tick out a few smaller little things while we have reached kind of an end to this discussion. If we go back up on page 1, I'm not asking you to do that, but if everybody looks at it. Again, we're gonna set aside the 51%, which is language that came from the governor's bill. A school district shall not pay tuition of a student except to a public school, and we have language that says located in Vermont. But we have not said anything about a 25-mile whatever. We do have to accommodate.
Line 18.
Public school located in another state.
Line 4.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
gonna be an issue where I live, so.
Yeah. All right, could you give us the legal explanation of how the subheads are? So I guess I'm having trouble telling whether this can be a public school in another state or not.
Yes, so, subsection A is broken up on each number under A,
Little a.
little a.
Yeah.
So starting on line 4, 1, and then 2, and then 3 is on line 13.
I'm understanding.
And they're all different types of educational programs. So you can have a public school located in Vermont, line 4, school district could pay tuition to that. And on line 16, a school district could also pay tuition to a public school located in another state.
There it is.
Okay. All right, so there's always been ideas of throwing around like a border, 25 miles or whatever. I'm hesitant to do that. I don't think we need to really, if we're paying tuition to a public school. Hard to imagine that it wouldn't be anything but one that's across a border, because otherwise somebody would be changing their residency. So if everybody's okay with that, we can do that.
So to be clear,
Yes.
even, because I'm still kind of confused, maybe it made it worse, why in line 4 seems in contrast to line where we just were, 18.
That's a Beth question. If I read this, it says line 3, a school district shall not pay the tuition of a student except to a public school located in Vermont.
But then down below, it
And then-
says you can be out of state, so I'm,
Right, so it's
but that's
allowed.
It's a
not
list of
first.
options.
okay.
Yeah.
It's just a menu.
I mean, correct to say we could actually just consolidate them by saying located in Vermont or another state. Does the same thing, just for, I'm not saying.
Would you like that?
Well,
changed
I
to
think
remain?
Yeah.
we might want to add something to the part where it says in another state. I don't know if putting them together
Could-
quite yet.
Contiguous.
I'm gonna say border.
Well, I would say if a public school doesn't exist within your district or something like that.
Well, it exists, but.
But then you might have
distance.
a 2-hour drive to that school, no other options, not because we pigeonholed ourselves up.
Do they call it like
That's why
reciprocity
we were
or
trying to
something?
work
Is
with-
that border state
Uh,
with reciprocity?
So I'm gonna follow that thought up, because I get what you're saying. And say that this is kind of a temporary world on the current system. And then we will, when we have larger districts, then it would really become a district policy. Because essentially, when we move to larger districts, just as in the governor's language, we would not have any non-operating districts.
That's right.
So. that
Then
would
there
addr-
wouldn't be a reason for someone to go to a public school out of state.
Well, but there still will be Guildhall.
Mhm.
Not if there's a new school built up in that area.
Right, well, that's not gonna happen. Or let's just say, until that happens, there still needs to be a place for people to go. Stanford, Vermont, right on the Mass border is another one where they're super geographically isolated. They've always gone over to Williamstown for high school. But that is an issue that will be dealt with within the new districts, because we're not having non-operating districts. Probably within the chartering language of each and every district.
I guess I was just making a plug to keep them separate the way they are
Okay.
listed here,
Okay.
rather than putting them together, because future state could lead us to repealing that line or whatever.
Well, that's kind of, I was wondering, so would we have to sunset parts of this then?
Will we start
Don't
creating new
know.
districts?
Yeah, well, right, because we can't have some permanent stuff in there and some. If some of it's
Don't
not
know.
permanent, depending on,
Go ahead.
Isn't that part of the challenge of creating new districts? I mean, like sort of back to our existential dilemma of like the last few weeks, which is we'll just draw the maps, but actually just drawing the maps means we have to figure out every single bit of minutia of all of this, not
Yeah.
even dealing with the election side. of things.
Exactly.
So in essence, if you have kind of a clean slate of districts, everything
have
has
to
to be, either
recreate.
you can just take the old and say, well, now we're gonna apply that to the new system, but that will have to happen in basically every instance of rule in every part of our system. Nothing will automatically, I don't know, I'm genuinely, I'm saying,
I mean,
I should ask it as a question. I'm asking. Doesn't, is it going to force us to decide that?
Yes.
Yes.
Or say, yes, we will just take from the old system, but if there's no automatic, we create a new district, that any of this still
This has been, sort of
exists.
one of my concerns with, the governor's proposal is that, you create these new districts and it says, and there will be no non-operating districts. And the secretary has said right there, but of course we know that parts of Vermont, we're gonna have to make exceptions. Well, we don't have that's absolutely true. We do have to make exceptions. The question is, in the new world of new districts, how do we do that? And I think that's where we get into a discussion for next session about the charters for each district. Where we can say, no, we're building schools and everything's gonna be public. Or we can say in District A, the school district board can make whatever, allowances for the need to, utilize an independent school or public school out of state in order to meet the education needs of their kids. Does that good answer your question at all in any way?
It might have,
Well,
but I'm still,
Coming off on a
I'm not
tangent.
shoring all this up in my brain, because if we're doing this and then all of a sudden when district lines get redrawn again, they're gonna be able to do whatever they want, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, we are, so why do this if we're just gonna redo it?
Well, if we do this, then, I guess why do this if it's apparently, from what I'm hearing, not gonna mean anything when there's new districts, but it's gonna be in state statute, so it's gonna have to mean something. And, I'm trying to shore it up in my brain.
Thanks. Kind of scrambling mine up here too. I think we need to we're building for two systems. The one we're in and the one we want to get to. The one we're in may exist longer than we hope. So I think we need to be aware of that. If sort of new districts and new configuration, all that is operationalized in 2029, we got a ways to go. We also, the journey of our bill, if we put something out there and the governor vetoes it, we all gotta come back together again. Who knows how? I think we need to build for both systems. Frankly, it's a contingency.
I was just gonna add that, depending on how this work all moves forward over the next, X number of years, I think Beth would probably tell us that Title 16 would look radically different at the end of it. We're talking about eliminating sort of huge chunks of our current framework and potentially building it again from the ground up, so.
I also sort of like the concept of taking incremental steps toward that new reality so that everybody starts becoming comfortable with them.
That's transformation.
So you don't get to stop time, if we can bewitched, like stop time, create the whole new world and then we start. The kids still have to go to school, they still, like everything, you have to budget a year in advance, bills have to be paid, and that's the hard part of, we don't get to start over. We have to start.
I hear that, and I'm also hearing my constituents who have to worry about paying higher property tax bills every single year, and this is one of my biggest fears was not getting the districts done, because I think what to Chris's point, or Representative Taylor's point, is get it all done, and these things will work themselves out in the new districts. These are decisions. I'm not confident we're gonna be ready to make these decisions next session. So.
Just changing class size alone?
I'm not talking just class size, I'm talking just everything. I think the point Representative Taylor was talking about was if we start picking here, it's like a ripple effect that we need to do everything at once and I hear you that there was holes in it, and that's why I wish that we would have been able to just go section by section and there was like a blueprint on there, but I digress, and that's just some of my frustrations. I feel like we're not ready for.
Well, to me, it kind of shows that those holes that need to be filled in are significant. And all of these same questions are gonna be part of it. And again, moving there, doing this is sort of like signaling and incrementally getting there. Now, maybe we come back with new district lines next year and boom, we overtake this process. Yeah.
I think the work that we're doing, again, is being responsive to what we heard from voters around reducing property taxes. When we talk about minimum class sizes, we know what that means. It means fewer teachers employed. So there's going to be some cost savings, if you would, that's going to help reduce property taxes just in the work that we have before us. So I think as we think about transformation and creating a vision and a mission for what we want public education to look like in Vermont, we're gonna have to take small steps. This is a small step. And to your point, we can change this same step that we're making this year, next year, if need be.
Chris?
I'm gonna choose my words wisely. This, what we're looking at right now, has very little to do with the public school transformation. This whole part of the section is about independent schools. And I find that it's slightly opportunistic. Is my opinion. That we are taking this opportunity to try to do this to the independent schools instead of focusing on the transformation of public education in Vermont.
Public, yes,
Public
public education is
education
everywhere
includes
that our dollars go,
independent
and so
schools.
if we're here only to talk about and to sort of fence off some part and say that that's separate and different, I can't. I thought we were talking about transformation of, and to be clear, property taxes pay for all of this, independent schools receiving public tuition included, so if that is the challenge, then that is why we are tied in knots, that's why this moment is tense, because it's all of it.
And can I just back up for a second?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we should not be holding some of these schools to the same standards as that, you know, I can kind of go along that path as well, but I'm just, the other parts of it is a little frustrating.
Would you want to be more specific?
Just the cherry picking parts that we're gonna talk about at some point,
No, all right.
you know, and it's just, if we're gonna strictly talk about class size minimum, it will be much easier for me to get on board with things than when we start cherry picking other sections of 454 that we haven't read one page in this committee, but we're gonna start taking parts of it and put in that we feel are gonna move us in a certain direction that some of us are looking to go.
Yeah, so I would just say, you know, when we talk about controlling educational costs, secretary, everybody uses the word scale. And I think scale is it as in, my tax dollars are going to be more responsibly used as we achieve scale. And I think that when we get to class size minimums, I think scale should be as applicable to one as the other. We had gotten into talking about how we ended up where we are. We were talking about borders, state borders,
Yeah.
and making allowances for public schools to go over the border. I'm not sure how we move. I mean, we certainly had to keep doing that. Yeah. I'm at the gibberish phase.
So we're back at the borders in Vermont now. So there's no exceptions in this, there's exceptions to go out of state. But we haven't decided.
To a public school.
To a public school, yeah. But we haven't decided any perimeters on that. If it's a contiguous state,
That's right.
if there's a mileage.
That's right. It just says,
State
I know,
in another
that
state.
we can, you know,
State of borders,
continue, we can say
Yeah.
contiguous state, I don't think anybody's gonna argue with that. We tried it a
Is
number
it
of times.
necessary?
hasn't gone anywhere, but mostly through just lack of action.
We've done 25-mile ones too.
We've done
We
25.
literally have.
Yeah.
I,
They didn't pass.
I was gonna say, did those not pass?
We-
We need to go.
We
back.
did it
I hate
during that
picking
46
mileage.
I
process.
Yeah.
was to say, I agree with you, because what if it's 26 miles? It's closer than the public school in Vermont, so I'm happy with what you said, Beth. Don't put a specific mile on it.
And really, anybody going further than that, like divorced parents and one lives in a choice, there's residency stuff would get so complicated.
Sibling stuff has also been proposed, you know, like you children outside, when we were contemplating, it wasn't in this miscellaneous ed bill, when we were contemplating the 25-mile, and I don't remember whether you were on the committee then or not, Peter, but we also said that any siblings in the family would be able to continue to go to the school that their siblings went to, even if it wasn't within that 25 miles, until they don't have any more siblings, until they graduate. So there's been all kinds of proposals in the
So
past.
what you are bringing up is actually something we probably would need to talk about, and then grandfather.
That's how it was.
So,
You know, so if we were to implement something like this, all of a sudden, those students who might be, you know, a freshman at Deerfield, this would eliminate that as an option. I'm not quite sure, I may just let that float there for a while.
So, I know that this is gonna come up because it came up last year when we started talking about this, the school in Canada.
I was gonna ask the same thing, but is that a public school?
No, so that will be a topic that comes up, and I don't know if we wanna discuss any of that right now, or wait until it comes.
Well, the governors all say no independent schools outside of Vermont.
I believe from diving into this a couple of years ago, the school in question in Canada, it costs significantly more than what the public tuition piece would be. You know, that's sort of the coupon the state of Vermont is giving that family for going to this school. They're still paying significantly more. It's not as if it's just covering all of it, and so it's, you know, there's a choice being made there. And I also wonder in our current geopolitical world, if it will even be, you know, Derby Library now is only open on one side, right? Like, so are we in a place where we want to be dealing with schools outside of our borders? Times we live in, but unless somebody comes to us otherwise, from past history of delving into this, it was quite clear that the one school in question and a couple of students involved, it cost significantly above what the tuition allowance would be, so.
My issue with the Canada one has always been that we require all schools wanting to accept public dollars to accept a special education placement in that district. The always concern me is if that were to happen, like let's say a sibling who's on an IEP wants to join another sibling there, and the LEA thinks that's the best placement for that sibling. How do you do the required work that's
Reporting.
involved when you got a border and a very tenuous border situation in order to meet those obligations? That's always been my personal issue. But anyway, we've only been talking about public schools out of state, but these sort of like, what about those who've already started questioning? Probably we need to talk about as well. I think we'll close here. Or if
Okay.
it's something simple to discuss, but I don't think so. Then we'll pick back up tomorrow. That sigh of frustration was nothing with any of you. It has to do with our time available, our time on the floor, and all of that. I think we're really gonna be kind of going by the seat of our pants timing wise here, and when we're here, so just everybody keep watching your texts and all that.
But we will get permission to leave the floor. if
We
there's not
have
a-
permission to
okay,
leave the
great.
floor.
I want to make sure that was
Yeah.
continued.
Okay, let's close there then.